So, today's going to be kind of a weird chat. I've been watching, as one of my avoidance techniques, right? And if you've been watching Austerlitz, you've heard some of this. I've been watching a lot of Lord of the Rings discussion videos and whatnot. Very, people who are complete Tolkien nerds. Most specifically, this one guy, which kind of intrigued me, because usually most of the Tolkien nerds, I just kind of zone out on. It's not that I'm not interested in what they have to say. It's just it's scripted, and they're basically regurgitating stories that I may have forgotten, or points that I don't know. But this particular guy, I'm trying to remember. I don't even remember. He goes by the name Rainbow Dave, but it's not his channel. But when I first ran into him, it was kind of like, geez, this guy's not like the others. It's not as dry, but, he's such a sort of hippy-dippy type, love and friendship, and his takes on the characters and on everything are very different from my view, my philosophy, etc. However, there's something very, very infectious about the way he does his things. It's obviously scripted, either that or, he's a god of extemporarizing. Anyway. But anyway, even with the scripting and whatnot, even with the fact that he's English and pronounces his R's like W's, there's just something so infectious about his enthusiasm for it. And it's clearly greater than mine. My story stops with Lord of the Rings with one of two. I don't know which one. I read both of them. The Unfinished Tales and The Lay of Beleriand, along with the Tolkien published stuff. I don't think I've read anything after those. But anyhow, in terms of the Christopher Tolkien releases and whatnot. But it's really, really great. And this guy, links together stuff and weaves together points, has these fun facts where he's doing his research and whatever on one thing, and something clicks and he makes videos on little things. He used to just plop them in at the end of his videos, but now they're standalones that go into more detail that are, just a delight, these particular pieces. The rest of it, the way he tells the story and everything, I find much more engaging than most of the summations. And he also goes into analysis and theories and stuff that I also find more intriguing than most of the other takes that I've seen, where he's willing to go off canon, hypothesize about stuff. Anyway, that's been the last week at least, while I've been sick, probably a little earlier than that. One of my sort of hooks before this, I was watching baseball vids from, players that I don't even know because they're like, post 2000 post 2005, say, because I had a little flurry when my first wife left me, where I got into baseball again for a little while. But, just my way of avoiding life and I have a hard time playing games very heavily. But anyway, what I thought, as we try to get to the point of the video, was, in addition to this, which I think is all very interesting and everything, but, doesn't deserve a video of its own, I thought to myself, self, that's for my past life. Wouldn't you like, wouldn't it be kind of interesting to explore my history with Tolkien? Maybe, maybe not. I think for some of you, yes. Now, I haven't read any Tolkien in a long time, but I decided, okay, that makes sense. Self, I'll do that. Okay, I never did that, but okay. So my first experience with Tolkien was, and yes, I don't pronounce it Tolkien, and I get most of the characters' pronunciations very different from how they're supposed to be as well, because my first experience was with my mother reading them to me. I think she read me The Hobbit. It may have been my dad who read it to me. But I know she read me The Lord of the Rings. And they kind of, both shared time, but I think my mom did the majority of that reading to me. And I was relatively young, but not real young, when these were being read to me. I don't remember exactly how young. I know that I was in Goshen, which means, I don't know, somewhere between like 6 and 9. I'm guessing probably on the earlier end of that. And there came a point, I don't remember where, within Lord of the Rings, where, and I think within the first book, to tell you the truth, where I'm like, this is scaring me. I don't think I'm old enough for this. Yeah. And so we put it off for a year or so and then went back to it. And then later on I read, I don't know if anybody read me The Tolkien Reader. That became a favorite of mine to read to other people, especially Farmer Giles of Ham, which I would fucking do on video. Like, I don't have a copy of it, but I would get a copy of it, I would read it on video, except that the stupid copyright laws and all the extensions to them. And that was published relatively late, I think, like later than The Hobbit at least. Because The Hobbit's his first published work. I don't know if it came out after Lord of the Rings. But I know that whatever the timeline is, it hasn't quite reached it yet. Although some things have that we're getting into some things that maybe I will try to do a reading for. But I can't chance, losing my video channel, and if I don't do it under this, well, it just, other people do readings of copyrighted material that wouldn't be covered under fair use, but I have enemies, and this channel I can't afford to lose. So, yeah, I don't do that. But I never really liked The Lord of the Rings all that much. And I never liked The Hobbit. I mean, I liked the Hobbit story a great deal, but I didn't like the poetry and all that crap. First of all, I don't think Tolkien was a particularly decent poet. And certainly, the kind of doggerel that, in my opinion, he wrote, it didn't carry over this sort of the beauty of the elves or anything like that in terms of what I'd expect to hear in terms of the kind of things that they would recite. So all of that, that never charmed me very much. And at times, Lord of the Rings felt ponderous. Certainly less so than some things, but it just it was never the light reading I wanted it to be. You know, The Hobbit certainly was. The Tolkien reader was. I ended up collecting up all of the Iron Crown Enterprises, ICE, Rollmaster, Middle Earth stuff. And I had a whole bunch of it. And I ran a Middle Earth based campaign that was kind of weird. Well, let me go before that. Before that, in my first real sort of D&D campaign with people other than my parents, I got drafted in to run, and I brought my own main character who had a sword that I had decided I would name the Sword of Arendelle. So I was using Tolkien names in it. I had a character, Glorfindel, from it. He had the Sword of Elendil. They were twin swords that could kind of shape change. Really, really cool little thing. Not powerful artifacts particularly, but more powerful than your average magic sword. And I certainly allowed, you know, D&D is almost based on a Tolkien-like universe, although the magic is certainly too strong and too common. But, you know, I threw some in just for flavoring, without going overboard on it. And it was a Munchkin-y type campaign in a lot of ways. I had a lot of fun with it, you know. Let the players have their head and become powers in the world and whatnot, dealing with gods and everything in the end, after a couple of years. And, you know, I know a lot of people would make fun of that kind of campaign. I still kind of want to run things kind of like that, but more seriously, which is why Amber is a lot of fun for me, for example, where the characters are gods, essentially. But I like the idea of building up characters to be world powers. And I kind of feel like the original campaigns, things like Greyhawk and stuff, the characters in that, reach that kind of power. I don't want to spend 10 years getting there, though, of playtime, right? I want, and Pendragon's kind of cool that way, too, where you get to rule your own land and everything fairly quickly. So I like that kind of atmosphere. But anyway, that's kind of besides the point, because we're trying to deal with Tolkien here, and it only has a tangential effect on the D&D that I played. In later D&D campaigns, I tried to be more serious, you know, keep people at lower levels and not let them get lots of experience real quick and not let them get artifacts and whatnot. And that... When I moved away to college was really sort of the first time when I started getting people to play Rollmaster with me. And my first campaigns of that were definitely not Tolkien based. I didn't feel that Rollmaster did a good alignment with Tolkien, but I was collecting up all the Tolkien source material for it. Unfortunately, at a later point in my life, when I was with my first wife, I ended up selling all that to a friend of mine because I was short on money. But I didn't realize was how much that was worth. I sold it for less than I paid for it. Yeah, I had like 20 of the expansions or whatnot. And they were all at least $10 each. Some of them were significantly, were $20 each when I bought them. But I sold them for, I don't know what it was, $100, $150, somewhere in that range. Because I was in debt to another friend. And what was really fucked up about it was my other friend was like, geez, man, if I had known you were going to sell them, I would have told you, don't worry about the debt. I would rather you have those books because I would really like to see you run this. Unfortunately, though, like I said, Rollmaster doesn't really fit the Tolkien world very well. You can make it fit. You can bend Rollmaster to anything. I bent it to Thieves Guild, actually, very, very nicely, where I only picked out certain classes. Basically, I was able to align certain classes once, I'm up to companion 5 or whatever with this, was able to align certain classes with all of the main characters and just fit them in perfectly, with some limitations and whatnot, but I was able to figure everything out so that it worked really, really well under Rollmaster, just because the compendium of different spell types fit so well. You could almost always sliver something and find something that worked. And if you really limited magic and reduced the power that there was in Rollmaster and limited the classes, I think you could get it to work in a Rollmaster type setting. One of the problems with Rollmaster, of course, is that you start off as like a below average person. You're average. So D&D has this concept where a first level character is not a Superman, but is significantly better than your average soldier, even your experienced soldier. In Rollmaster, a first level character is really kind of like a young teen in terms of the capabilities that they have, at best. Their stats, though, are near adult level, like 17 or 18. So, actually, one of the Rollmaster games that I ran, and yeah, we do tangents here a lot. One of the Rollmaster campaigns that I ran early on, where I played around with the magic system, where players had to, they cast spells not by saying, I cast this, but by using a magic word that was essentially the reverse of the word that they were using. The problem is my brain wasn't fast enough to handle it. My players were able to deal with it, but I wasn't smart enough. I thought I could. I had little cheat cards and everything, but it was just too complex. I started everybody off at like 3rd or 4th level because I felt like that was about the right level for someone who was an adult entering into an adventuring situation. And that felt pretty good. Magic users could actually do something. Magic users in D&D were just as bad. I don't know where it is now, but back when I was first doing AD&D, and even basic D&D before that, it came out like I got basic D&D and then I got the Monster Manual. I got them really as they came out. Basic maybe a little after it came out, but it was that first edition with the first adventure. I don't remember what it was, but it was the one of it. And everybody else started with 2. I didn't start with the 3 little books. I had a friend who almost bought them, who ended up in my game group. But glad we avoided those because those were a mess. But we ended up, but D&D ended up with first level fighters and clerics and even thieves. We're all kind of okay. First level magic users, they couldn't fight. They didn't have any skills that were useful. Pretty much they could cast a spell, and that's it. A first level cleric, well, you got to heal light wounds or whatever, and you're a decent fighter. And that might allow you to save a fighter in the midst of combat or whatever. And of course you rest for a day after every time you get in a fight because you're screwed otherwise, whatever, which felt completely disconcerting. But in Rollmaster, it was very similar. Your first level character might be able to throw off a couple spells, but they were so fucking useless. But by 3rd or 4th level, you had a sleep spell, which was about equivalent to what the first level magic user could do with any effectiveness. You had I don't know what else, but you also could have taken some fighting skills and not be that lousy at fighting as well. But by third or fourth level, the characters had a certain equilibrium. Of course, magic users become much more powerful in both systems than the fighter type as you get to higher and higher levels. And I kept this idea up, I think, starting at a moderate level when I did my Tolkien campaign. That was awfully silly. I was still in a silly phase. I had become very competent, I think, at running Rollmaster, where I could do groups of like a dozen people and handle the combat relatively quickly. One of the keys to that is make sure everybody has their own charts and the GM has whatever charts they need. And we had that very easily because we had several sets of like of the game between us as a group. Other people were familiar with Rollmaster already, and also I had multiple sets. I had bought, I think, the second edition of Arms Law, but then found a friend who had first edition, or I don't know if it was a friend, I think it was, a friend who had first edition of Arms Law but didn't want it, so I bought it off of him. I had the early edition of Spell Law because I wanted to incorporate the magic system that was much richer than the D&D magic system, but I never figured out a way of doing that effectively. Of course, by the time Character Law came out, things were different. They were no longer that really nice parchment and everything. But yeah, we had enough copies that everybody had what they needed, and they had the charts they needed. When I ran my third one, which was not Tolkien-based, it was based more on my weird semi-science fiction world, we were working off of only my two sets of Arms Law, and one other player had a complete set of all the stuff. Nobody else was a Rollmaster aficionado. That was perhaps a little bit more tricky, but we had a smaller group, so it worked out pretty well. But yeah, I found it very hard, if you can't let the players be whatever they want, especially once you start adding expansions after expansions. But this was still fairly early. You didn't have things like the Chaos Lord and shit like that. That worked fine in my world, but didn't work in a Tolkien world. I gotta pause and swap batteries. We'll get more to the effect the actual literature had on my life. Again, don't worry about that. But I feel like, my life and gaming are so combined that we kind of have to tie that in even when we're looking at something along these lines. And we'll also look at some more modern aspects as well, the movie and even maybe the current kerfuffle. Just to tell you what I intend to talk about way deep in the weeds. So one of the problems with the Rollmaster supplements was they were too high a magic level for Middle Earth. And the Middle Earth supplements I'm talking about here. So, you'd have like some of the kind of more important places in them, but there'd be like 9, 10th level necromancers in a single location or something like that. And I'm like, that's just crazy levels of power. There's nothing in the Tolkien books that indicates this kind of magic being flung around. And it just became too disturbing. And when you read the real the actual source material, well, I mean, in Lord of the Rings, what magic is there that's going on? You have a little bit of mental control type stuff by both Sauron and by Gandalf, and maybe some others. stuff like that that's not very flashy. I'm okay with that kind of magic, and I'm actually okay with that kind of magic being fairly powerful within the realm of the Rolemaster confines. You have hints of things like the Mouth of Sauron was powerful in sorcery, but you never have a sign of it. The big magic, the really big magic, even that doesn't do all that much. I mean, it can be really potent. Things like, Lorien being basically invulnerable and unable to be invaded, or the capability of the ring to turn ring wraiths and whatnot. But this is sort of the most powerful magic in the realm, that there's like one person who can do this in the entire story. And in the case of the rings, it involved this huge crafting exercise that put part of his Sauron's soul in the one ring for him to be able to turn the ring wraiths. And yet, for most people, well, for Frodo, you put the ring on, it makes you invisible. Whoop, whoop, whoop. I mean, this is something your third or fourth level character can do, right? Anyway, so the levels of power that were represented, even in the source material that you're intended to run, and it was kind of intended to run a Fourth Age type campaign, but it was written so that it would work fine in Third Age. There were some materials that you could go back to an earlier period, but there was at least when I was in it, was buying the books, there was nothing that covered things like Beleriand. So you really were in no position to do anything too early. I'm trying to think. So yeah, Second Age is where Beleriand goes down. So there may have been a book on Numenor available at some point or another, but I didn't get that. But yeah, so most of the stuff I had could have reached anywhere from early Third Age on. And some of it, I had things like the Witch King of Angmar, which, could not be used in late Third Age or Fourth Age. Although the maps could. And oh boy, this is where these were beautiful. So they had the beautiful, beautiful maps and a consolidation of information that had been collected up. Some of which went beyond what I had available. Well, yeah, what I had available at that time. I was never a huge Tolkien nerd. Now, I had one in my group, but only one really, who would correct me on certain things. But the first group, the one group that I played, tried to do a Tolkien-based campaign off of. I let everybody kind of pick what they wanted to be out of the early classes, probably Companion 1, no further than that. I don't think anything else was out yet. And the races, any races they wanted. And I just ended up with this weird mishmash that I tried to weave a story with, but it was fucked up. So I had I don't know, I think a demi-dwarf or something like that. I had, which is fine, although they're pretty rare. I had a Noldor in it, which the Tolkien-based guy was really unhappy about. After he lost, his first character was a dark troll. So, I have a Noldor and a dark troll in the same party. There was a black Númenórean in the party. I don't remember what else was in it at that point. I think think I had a dryad in it. We had one guy who, with everybody picking all this weird shit, whatever. But anyway, it just, it ended up a chaotic sort of party of the sort that I would have when I tried to run RuneQuest as well. And I've learned my lesson, focus, don't let the players make whatever characters they want. Work out with them as a group, or else devise for yourself and just enforce it on them, what the base storyline is going to be. And don't let things go all over the place like one did elsewhere. But, anyway, we did have this storyline, and the thing with the Noldor, and both why he was allowed into to be in the campaign as like a third level Noldor was because this is what the Tolkien nerd puts out is, well, you can't have a Noldor, he'd have to be thousands of years old in that case. Like, oh, okay, well, maybe he has amnesia. So that allowed him to be low level, and it also fit in that allowed like there to be an evil side to the party. Now the party was not clearly evil or good, but there was, I did set it up so that there was sort of they are not necessarily evil. Although the Black Númenórean, who had the Dark Troll as his pet, basically, and he was like a Dark Númenórean necromancer or something like that, but not terribly powerful. And there weren't some of the skills that allowed you to like cast above level and stuff. Those abilities didn't really exist yet. So he was fairly limited in terms of what he was able to do as a mage. And we had a couple of Haradrim in it. I mean, it really was kind of more of an evil bent party, but it ended up splitting where the truly evil characters went in one direction and the ones who were more nebulous and gray ended up going in another direction. Just they couldn't handle it. And that worked well because I had like 12 players in the group. And one of them, the guy who was the Dark Troll, he ended up dying, and then he brought in like this weird thing that was not at all Tolkien. He was the Tolkien fan, but he was like, how about I do this? And it's like something from some other book where it's like this shape-changing thing that just has to eat its mass to, and I may have read this story eventually later. It had to eat its mass and stuff if it wanted to bulk up into something bigger. So he, couldn't turn into something huge overnight. And if he was something big, he wasn't really effective anymore. And yeah, they raided treasures in Arnor to begin with. This was late Third Age that I was running it in. And then we're heading down south, which is how they met the Haradrim and how things got broken up more and more. But I never felt like, the source books gave me a good enough grounding in something that felt like a role-playing environment that fit the Tolkien level of magic. And so it didn't feel too unreasonable to just throw together all this random stuff that was, characters that were too powerful and whatnot for the world, because I felt like the things they were facing didn't really fit the milieu properly. All right. So I think that's it for role-playing in Middle-earth for me, because that was sort of the last time I did that. But then when I met my first wife, I know I read her the Tolkien Reader. She had tried reading, she had read The Hobbit fine. It was so-so on it. Tried reading Lord of the Rings and despised it when she was younger. And I read her the Tolkien Reader, and she had fun with that. Um, but then, what actually hooked her was I started reading her stuff from the Silmarillion, which I never liked because, again, it's too dense and heavy, just like Lord of the Rings is, and even more so. It's like the appendices to Lord of the Rings. But she just fucking fell in love with it at that point and went back, read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and then we started collecting, what we could, and like I said, The Lay of Beleriand and The Unfinished Tales, both of which I think I read. I know she read them. But it was kind of interesting to see someone get to it from the Silmarillion side rather than from what was sort of the more standard, getting into the Silmarillion through the Lord of the Rings or whatever. We went and saw the movie, the first movie, and the Peter Jackson one. I had seen some of the other stuff before, but I was actually pretty impressed with it. I had this feeling of, it doesn't really feel like the book, but it's more exciting, and I can deal with the things that they added and some of the things that they left out at that point. And none of it seemed too terrible. I could understand some of the artistic decisions. It didn't feel like it violated the world terribly. Okay. And I enjoyed it. I went to see the second one, and I was thoroughly disappointed, especially at the end. So there were a few things that I really didn't like about it. One, the first thing that really hit me with it was when they got to Lothlorien and the gifts were given out and whatnot, and the Malorn nut wasn't given. Now, to me, and I know other people don't seem to get this argument at all, but to me the Malorn nut is almost the culmination and the whole story, right? It's the idea that after the war is over, after the destruction, after all the pain in the life, there's a true rebirth. And the Malorn kind of expressed that in a way that nothing else does in as clear a term. Not, the scouring of the Shire and whatnot is just not going to do that. And as soon as I saw that they didn't give that, I'm like, whoa, how are they going to tell the real meaning of the story? Yes, some people essentially die, like Frodo. He doesn't die, he goes on to the west, but he's gone. He's worn out and destroyed by life. And Lothlorien is essentially becomes deadness afterwards, but it gets transplanted by that one nut. Anyway, I saw that as much more important than many of the other elements of the story that were left out. Things like Tom Bombadil or whatever, which, that is kind of important. The idea of hey, those blades came from somewhere and they have an important impact on the story later on. But that's lore type stuff. It isn't really the fundamental point or a fundamental point of the whole story. It's not just good versus evil, but it's that after all that destruction, there is a true rebirth and a regrowth. And it's not just going back to life how it was, but it's that life in the Shire, for example, will be better than it ever was in a way that you couldn't really express in a movie very nicely, but the nut would have. The other thing was the very end of that second movie, there was this sort of, and there were scenes that were like this, like on top of Weathertop where Aragorn is able to beat up all the Nazgul with his flame and sword that he shouldn't have. He didn't have a sword at that point. He had a broken hilt. But yeah, he's able to just kick ass and wipe them out. Yes, he was instrumental in getting them off, but not the way that it's shown at all. It felt way too cinematic and way too much of a concession. But okay, I can live with that. Um, but at the very end of that second movie, after they've already disappointed me by saying, "Yeah, we're not going to cover the thing that you think is the most important in the Lord of the Rings at all. We're not going to even include it in the story," um, is to after Boromir's dead and Frodo and Sam have left, there's this almost feels like a football team getting ready at the end of halftime. Let's go get them. I mean, it felt so wrong to me. Uh, so much against the spirit, like so modern, and I don't even have words to express it. It was such a letdown that I didn't go see the third movie. Now I eventually saw it on a TV, a very small one, with my mom and my brother, both of whom had seen it before and were really into it, into the whole movie. And so many people really are. I don't get it, but I saw the third one, and honestly, what I saw of it felt no better, and the Scouring of the Shire felt like that same kind of shit. It didn't feel real to me. It felt modern. Um, it didn't feel like the right kind of enthusiasm for what they're doing. Other parts of it, well, as a lot of people have pointed out, Frodo comes off as a total fucking wuss throughout the whole movie series, and he really kind of wasn't. And just a whole bunch of stuff where, some of the choices that were made fucked with the character conceptions that the book paints very, very nicely. But that's life. I did not see any of the Hobbit stuff. I have no interest in doing something like that on my own, and that would have been the only way I could go about it. Well, I could have probably convinced my past wife to watch stuff. She was into movies a lot, but I just couldn't put my seal of approval on any of it. I knew it was going to be lousy. It would have to be somebody dragging me into it rather than the other way around. Now, after my first wife left me, I brought, on my trip out west, I brought the Tolkien reader with me. And to the group of students that we were with, and about half of them stuck around for this, I would do firelight readings from it. And I love reading that aloud to people. It's just such a beautiful light story and just, set of stories. And one of the few that I do things, like with Garm the dog, help, 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 and there was someone I was trying to charm who was on that trip, and well, sort of a mixed thing, sort of did, but not in a romantic sort of way. So that's neither here nor there. Apparently, my skin smelled too sweet. She's like, she made this thing about, yeah, I could see an old lady liking that or something. I don't know, my skin smells salty to me, but, and now, unfortunately, as I've aged, more vinegary. But at that point, I knew there could be nothing between us because a sense of smell is so important in linking to someone. Anyway, so that was one other experience that I had with it. And since then, I've had nothing except for this desire to read the Tolkien reader on video at some point. And maybe if I get old enough that the copyright runs out, if my voice still exists, I might. But Um, and that's kind of where these literary discussions have come from. Is I want to share books with people. I used to enjoy reading aloud, but yeah, it's not something that can be done within the copyright. Maybe if I get some Dunsany, I've said this before. But now that I've gotten hooked back into it, I'm really loving getting these condensed versions and discussions, especially with the enthusiasm, etc. that I've got. But while I'm hitting that, the Amazon series trailer started falling into, not the trailer itself, but discussions of it, started falling into my awareness. Now, this is all from people who fucking love the movie, so, I don't trust them too much. What I saw of the trailer, they're pointing out things. I have different problems than they do with it. So the main problem that people seem to be pushing is that, it's all this woke stuff. And this woke stuff is destroying the story. But they seem to be more focused on the woke stuff, when honestly, to me it's more, wow, you're like actually not just putting stuff in that wasn't in the book, but putting stuff together that appears like it couldn't have been part of Tolkien's world at all. You're actually violating it. Now, the Jackson movies definitely do that as well. Throw Arwen in as like in place of Glorfindel and just cut parts of it out that are important and whatnot. So, I already lost my any respect I had for that with that second movie. The first one, I was like, I enjoyed this, and I'm not happy about some of the decisions they made. Some of the things like speeding everything up at the beginning, and also giving all that introductory work. You don't have that in the book, but okay, maybe that helps. Maybe that helps draw people into the story to give them all this information that the characters don't have. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe the modern mind needs that. I really don't know. But I'm much more worried about the violations, but I don't know that they seem terribly worse than the violations that I'm seeing in the movie that is so well revered now. On the other hand, I'm not sure that the things that they pointed out that are like, well, these are woke things that shouldn't be in there, actually bother me all that much. And, okay, maybe I'm a woke liberal libtard or whatever, but I don't know that I really am, because there's some things that really bother me about that kind of shit. So, oh look, they're black hobbits. So what? The female dwarf, that doesn't feel right to me. First of all, put a fucking beard on her, okay? Yeah, that's not Tolkien, but man, it's the excuse for why you can't tell whether whether dwarves are male or female, and it's a good answer to it. But she does not look at all like a dwarf, and there's a couple of other characters who just don't look like they belong there at all. Some do, some don't, and a little bit of makeup, a little bit of work with that to make them look different could have worked well without, saying, okay, well, we can't have dark-skinned people in it because Tolkien never mentions any dark-skinned people. And we don't know, again, like the Haradrim are probably relatively dark-skinned. There are probably others who you could fit in that way. Uh, who knows, thousands of years, what has changed between different eras, and that's fine. One of the big gripes seems to be that Galadriel is this warrior in it. And yeah, there's nothing in the story that says she was. But on the other hand, there's hints that she fought with the on the side of the Teleri, perhaps. Um, as long as they don't make her too badass, right? You know, which is kind of the thing. The hint is that she's going to be this badass, mighty warrior. Well, she certainly shouldn't be up there on the lines of, the great heroes, in terms of physical prowess. That's just not her thing, you know. Any more than it's Elrond's thing, you know. We know Elrond fought, but I wouldn't want to see her up at the level of that. Mainly, my problem has to do with the visual appearance of a number of the characters. And some of the elves that they have just don't look like elves, and it's not because of wokeness at all. Some of the casting choices that were made just, they violate my sense of believability, but in some cases with makeup or whatnot, they could be more believable. I don't mind there being a darker looking elf, but they shouldn't, a darker looking dwarf, but they shouldn't look not like dwarves, there's just this, whatever that means. It's, all the male dwarves in Tolkien have these long beards, right? Okay. Every man that they cast for it, probably none of them have a beard like that. Not everyone can grow a beard like that. Yet they use that to accentuate a dwarven look. It doesn't make sense to have someone who looks racially, in the sense of the Middle-earth races, different from that sort of phenotype that's being portrayed. There should be a believable appearance between what they portray the male dwarves as, and if they're going to portray female dwarves, make them look believable, not make it look like somebody from a completely different culture and whatever. And it's just a matter of trying to make and this is where I think some of the wokeness argument comes in. It's the idea not of who you cast for the part, but rather that you decide they should look exactly how they look in a different role, in a modern human role that they would be playing, even though you're not putting that constriction on the other people that you've cast in the role, in their roles. It's fine to make all the male dwarves look a certain way and to aim for people who look like that. Yet, you get somebody who looks like a modern, Indian woman. No, it doesn't look believable. They don't look like they're from the same general people, and it's not something to do with race, and it's not something to do with gender. I don't mind there being female dwarves, although they damn well better not look like they better have beards or else not be interacting with non-dwarves. That seems pretty clear. Although Tolkien kind of, doesn't throw a whole lot of females in of any of the races, but they're there. They're not they're not usually in the same kind of roles that maybe they want to put forward in this. I don't know why they'd want to. Again, would you take a story about the Crusades and make half the warriors women? No. You probably should treat the flavor of the story to be the flavor to be similar to what there is. Whatever you're going to project should reflect the same flavor in the same way that you would with history. And why is that important? Well, again, the people you most rely on to watch something are going to want to see something that looks like what they believe in. In the same way, and they have the same, if not more, commitment to that as do people who are going to look at something and say that's not historical. Now, you got these we're in such a weird era right now, where it's okay to kind of repurpose things completely. For example, one of the things that I see is big important show recently, this Bridgerton thing. Now, I've never seen it, but I see clips from it and whatnot. I'm like, wow, that doesn't look like Regency England at all. It's just like, I don't believe it, okay? Now, you might make that same argument with something like Hamilton, and okay, I'm certainly willing to accept Hamilton, because you also don't see the founding fathers. It's not believable that they're out there rapping. It's like when you translate Shakespeare into a different period or something. So that I'm fine with. What about the Bridgerton thing? Well, I think you could put the same lens on that. I think it's a lot more painful when this has never been done. Stories from the Second Age. It's never been done right. It's never been done per the book. If, like Shakespeare, like miniseries, like historical docudramas, if this was all out there and present already, if the people who were interested in that already had what they needed, then it would make sense. And, I guess it's okay in one sense. It's okay in that same sense, except that the thing that everybody's craving, the thing they actually want, isn't what's being provided. And, well, let's only hope that someone, say, is able to get, the rights to the Silmarillion, put the kind of money that Amazon's putting onto this, and do it right. Why not? Especially if they could do it relatively soon and follow up on it, just as a sort of a big fuck you. Give us garbage, yeah, we're not going to accept that, but give us something that fits the story, and we're just going to blow your crap out of the water. It'd be great if somebody were to do that as a competitive movie or resource that comes out at the same time. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, it really would be. But maybe there's a no compete. Maybe there's some kind of sign off that's like, yeah, you can't do another Tolkien license thing for at least 3, 5 years or whatever after this, whatever it is. I wouldn't put that past being part of the contract, which is a shame because it's definitely coming out at the right time. There's a craving from the people who could deal with the movie for something that's along those same lines. And, honestly, I would love to see the amount of money and imagery and everything that they're putting into this following the stuff from the Silmarillion. Of course, all that money they're putting into special effects and such now, they weren't willing to buy the rights to this untouched stuff. So that's kind of a hopeful thing, actually. So what's happening is they're writing a story that's pretending to be about Middle-earth. It's going to be Middle-earth branded, but it's not really part of it. And that's a lot better than, George Lucas signing off on Drek that's Star Warsy, right? Or whatever, because that Drek becomes the canon. Whereas here, this just becomes another one of them little offshoots. There were other movies made that were bad. I still think the Jackson movie failed completely as well. Not the first one, but after that, I gave up. Anyway, I guess that's about all I have to say. I'm not the hugest Tolkien fan out there, but I expect if I see something in the universe, it's going to be something that corresponds to it. Just like, if I go and watch a movie about the Crusades, then it won't be fucking Kingdom of Heaven and be completely bullshit, right? Those are expectations that, unfortunately, in this world, one can't rely on. Oh well.